Last summer, I was working as a server, and it was an okay job. I mean, we've all had okay summer jobs before. Your coworkers are nice, your boss can be kind of uptight, you get a couple of interesting customers, but that's just a part of working at a restaurant. But then you find that one super cool coworker that makes your 8-hour shift bearable. For me, his name was Adam. During work, we talked about everything from the music that he was making to our favorite movies. He worked as a cook in the back of the house. And when he found out I was homeless, he started purposefully messing up customers' orders so that I could take them home. He didn't know it, but sometimes those were the only hot meals I would eat in a week. My name is Elisabet Ortiz, and I'm a part of the 43% of US college students considered low income. What that's meant for me is experiencing systemic failings at both the university and the governmental level. Growing up, I was always searching for the feeling of home. I grew up with a lot of instability. Like many children experiencing severe poverty, my parents were absent. In my life, dysfunction was the norm. I was surrounded by poverty and abuse from my parents, and everywhere I went, I was searching for the feeling of home and community. It was a never-ending pursuit. During that time, what motivated me and pushed me was the possibility of going to college. College, especially a prestigious institution, represented promise. Promise of an entirely new life and promise of new opportunity. Going to an elite institution meant something different for me than for a lot of my peers. It was more than a ranking or a line on my resume. It meant that I was more than the life I was born into, and that I could build a life for myself free of suffering. And in fall of 2020, when I started school at a top 25 institution, I thought that I had finally achieved this. But then, during my freshman year, I found myself asking, am I really going to be homeless this summer? With this, the promise that college represented was broken. The life that I had built and the home that I thought I finally had were shattered. I always thought that going to a prestigious school was an end goal that meant I had finally made it and that everything was going to be okay. My world and everything I had worked towards felt like a lie. I know when people see me or hear that I go to a private liberal arts school, I know they don't see homelessness. But last summer, I was living out of 2 suitcases. I found myself in 4 different cities. I slept on 4 couches, and I worked 3 jobs. Every day was a new challenge and full of uncertainty. Suddenly, basic necessities like having a roof over my head, where my next meal was coming from, and healthcare were not guaranteed. I remember frantically calling friends, asking if I could stay with their families, and having to ration out $10 a week for groceries. In a lot of ways, the time in my life that was supposed to be full of change and self-discovery ended up being full of closing doors. But it wasn't all hopeless. Unexpectedly, I also found that my experience with homelessness was also full of community and solidarity. Friends and their families from my university opened their doors. People around me let me crash at their place, let me use their laundry machine, and gave me clothes for job interviews. People that had no reason to help me but decided to anyway. People that helped me in small and big ways. The collective of all these seemingly small actions made all the difference. My community helped me more effectively than any large institution was able to. My experiences with community and disenfranchisement have shaped the way I think about our approach to leadership and charity. Since we are young, we are told what a leader looks like. Someone that takes charge, who speaks first, talks the loudest, and pushes their ideas to the table. It is important to reevaluate this definition of leadership, as it affects the way we approach helping marginalized groups. We often discuss helping others with the traditional concept of charity, hierarchical organizations that seek to help those in need. Charities and nonprofits can often look like organizations with top-to-bottom structures that emphasize individual action rather than the community or group that make change happen. While this can be powerful, it can also be harmful. When I decided to go to a prestigious institution, I believed that the resources and structural systems advertised would be enough, but the proper infrastructure was lacking. There are clear parallels in the way that large institutions failed me and harmful practices that are present in charity. Some common harmful practices that are a large part of charity are emphasizing a focus on short-term solutions that do not solve the root of many issues. For example, the university advertised many services for equity on campus, but often those existing programs would lack proper funding and tangible resources. An obstacle I faced in my college experience was food insecurity. Instead of being provided a meal plan or additional funds, I was directed to an external food bank, putting the responsibility on me as an individual to seek out resources, rather than placing accountability on the university. Providing this as the only solution for food insecurity is unsustainable, as it only provides a temporary fix. Not allowing the individuals affected by a problem to have an equal say in creating solutions and development for progress is another major issue in charity. My university's administration was very removed from the daily lives of students on campus, especially for at-risk students like me. Barriers like inaccessible channels of communication and underfunded social programs furthered the disconnect between policymakers and students affected by their decisions. I experienced this firsthand by interacting with overworked caseworkers. In an entire student body of over 14,000, there were only 3 social workers available to work with students in need. By not supporting those meant to provide for disenfranchised students, this creates less opportunity for those students to be involved in the decision-making process affecting them. These factors lead to supposed solutions that are neither self-sustaining nor capable of long-term improvement for disenfranchised groups. I would like to propose that this is not the most effective way to help others and change the world around us. This structure makes it more difficult for the most vulnerable members of our communities to have an equal platform to voice their needs. It encourages being a savior over being an ally to disenfranchised groups, and it discourages people like me that don't have the lives or the resources, or that simply don't look like the stereotype of what a leader looks like, from taking action in their own lives or communities. My friend Adam from my OK summer job will never be on the cover of Time magazine. He'll never be interviewed by CNN. He'll never have a TED Talk. But he saved my life. This is something that can change. Working together to raise the voices of underrepresented people in an equal way is possible and necessary. I've seen a community-based approach to philanthropy work in both my personal life and my passion projects. During my experience with homelessness, I started an organization called Students for Students. Our mission is to create more equitable college campuses through advocacy and community. Students for Students both works to solve the long-term and immediate needs of at-risk students. Initially, we started as a community-funded collection to provide financial resources for my university's community to aid with such basic needs as housing, food insecurity, and health-related costs. We raised thousands of dollars and were able to help every student that reached out to us, demonstrating the power our community had. Through running this fund, our team realized that students were suffering from lack of resources and policy failings at the university level. Once the platform was created, we heard from students living in their cars, struggling to pay for groceries, and being forced to balance fulfilling basic necessities for themselves or their families and school life. One particular case that stood out to me was hearing from a nursing student who was living in her car. Suddenly, I understood that my story wasn't unique. This realization morphed Students for Students into an organization that also advocates for long-term changes through improving policies at the university level. When creating the structure of Students for Students, I considered how we could combat harmful practices prevalent in philanthropy and implement a new framework and approach. One method we have implemented is focusing on both immediate and long-term change through our community-based fund and advocacy work. We partner with the immediate ecosystem of a college campus to collect and distribute funding for the people right in their own community. We create an emphasis on solidarity with at-risk students, rather than having them seen as charity cases. While providing this immediate relief to students, we focus on building long-term structural changes through policy reform that will prevent these issues in the future. We treat each individual not as someone who fell through the cracks, but as the product of a larger pressing systemic issue. Our organization also works to raise the voices of marginalized groups and create a platform for them to voice concerns. We've done this by focusing on the intersectionality of social and economic issues. We work with differing cultural and social justice organizations on college campuses to hear their perspectives on existing policies. When we discuss issues like racial justice or gender equality, we address how they all affect each other. We also prioritize using a grassroots approach to everything our organization does. Grassroots movements involve giving a community the tools for self-organization and creating a culture where individuals learn to take responsibility for their community. We have been able to see change in several areas of social justice. We're changing policies on college campuses related to labor rights, racial equity, and social justice, and are currently focused on establishing a $15 minimum wage for student workers. What we are seeing is a network of thousands of students revolutionizing their approach to helping those in their communities. Today, I put on my professional clothes and I came here to talk to you all about my personal and undeniable experiences and what I've learned from them. Even still, I am full of self-doubt. Feelings of uncertainty about our own capabilities are a consequence of placing too much value on individual action, and this can prevent meaningful, collaborative change with lasting impacts. I hope that as you hear my story and the stories of students who couldn't be here today, you realize the tangible steps we can take to help our communities, including more people in the conversation, creating organizations that bridge the gap between leadership and marginalized voices, and having community members take more responsibility of the people around them. I hope that rather than seeing inevitability in our experiences, you see them as preventable with the right support and resources. The only reason I'm here with you today is because of what my community has done for me. I don't know where I'd be without it. I hope to provide the tools for others to do the same. Thank you.